What is a fiduciary? You've probably heard this term before. It's a big buzzword right now. More and more people are catching on to what it means to be a fiduciary, to work with a fiduciary financial advisor. But what is a fiduciary? If you were watching this and someone sent this to you, it's likely because you asked about what a fiduciary is. So what we want to do today is cover what exactly is a fiduciary, why does it matter so much, and what impact could that have on your life. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to find a fiduciary. So this is going to be a two-part episode as far as the podcast and YouTube go. It'll all be focused back towards one blog article that'll kind of summarize it all over the next 2 weeks. But this will be kind of your definitive guide onto what is a fiduciary and why does it matter so much. Right? We've talked about it on the show. We've thrown out, the terms like fee-only fiduciary, certified financial planner, and we've used that word a lot. And if you've never really understood what does that exactly mean, what does all encompass, we're going to talk about that today. And especially important one because there's a lot of people out there that as more and more people, more and more households in the U.S. want to work with a fiduciary financial advisor. More and more people are claiming to be fiduciaries, but they're not true fiduciaries. They're finding loopholes that allow them to call themselves that, even though they're not. And so we want to unpack that as well. So for over the next 2 weeks, we're really going to focus in on this. What does it mean to be a fiduciary, and how do you ensure that you're working with one? So first, what is a fiduciary? Well, a fiduciary is a professional that must act in the best interest of their client. There are fiduciaries in other industries, right? Doctors and attorneys are supposed to be fiduciaries, just to name a few. But obviously for our purposes, we're talking about being a fiduciary financial advisor. And so a fiduciary financial advisor is a professional who all their recommendations, any advice they give, anything that they recommend must be in the best interest of the client. And so it's a standard of behavior that is called the fiduciary standard, right? And so even if they got to put the client's best interest before their own, they can't recommend anything that benefits them more than the client, or can't recommend anything just because it benefits them more if something else would be better for the client. The other option, of course, is the suitability standard. So you have the fiduciary standard and the suitability standard. And while the fiduciary standard says that all professionals must act in the best interest of the client, the suitability standard basically just says, hey, you can recommend anything as long as it's good for the client, as long as it's suitable. If it would help the client in any way, you can recommend that, even if you are putting your own financial interests ahead of theirs. And so someone under the suitability standard, they can put their interests ahead of yours as long as they're still helping you out to some degree. And this matters a lot, right? Here's why it matters so much, right? Let's say that you're retiring and you're working with a financial professional, and they have two options that they're looking at, right? So option A gives you the best chance of retiring successfully and has lower fees and all these things, and it is going to pay that professional less. Option B will help you, but not as much. It's much more expensive, which takes away from the long-term performance. It's got other drawbacks, things that lock you in, some of these kind of things. It still helps you, but not nearly as much as option A. But the thing is that option B will pay the professional much more than option A will, right? So two options. Option A is better for you and worse for the professional. Option B is better for the professional, still good for you, but not nearly as good. So how does this play out then, right? Well, someone who's a fiduciary, someone who must act in your best interest, they're looking at these two options, and a fiduciary must recommend option A to you. They have to. It's in your best interest, and so even though it's not as good for them, they must act in your best interest. And so a fiduciary must recommend option A because it's in your best interest, even though it pays them less. A non-fiduciary may recommend option B because it pays them more, even if it helps you less. Right? There's a key distinction. Not that everyone who's not under the fiduciary standard is automatically going to recommend whatever helps them most, even if it helps you less. But they can. They don't have to recommend what's in your best interest. They can recommend what's in their best interest. And I remember I was sitting across from a potential client once from my financial planning firm, and they were, we were just interviewing each other to see if it was a good fit, and they had heard this name. I have heard. Are you and they couldn't remember what it was. I'm like, a fiduciary, and they're like, yeah, are you a fiduciary? And so they'd heard it, right? They didn't fully understand it, and so I said yes. And then I'm explaining these things to them, and they looked at me and they said, well, why would anyone work with someone who was not a fiduciary, right? Why would anyone work with someone who could put their own interests in front of the clients? And that's a great question, right? Why would anyone do that? Well, we want to answer that because it happens all the time. But first, let's just make a differentiation here between financial advisors versus financial representatives, right? I share a belief that's really growing. It's this growing movement where, anything that's all advice, right, should be in the client's best interest. If you're giving advice, it should be the best thing possible for the client, right? No, who gives like mediocre advice, especially when you know that there's better advice out there. And so therefore, anyone who calls themselves an advisor, they should also have to be a fiduciary, right? They should not be able to call themselves an advisor if they're not a fiduciary. And then there's this wholly other separate category of people that we'll call financial representatives. And these are people that they represent the companies that they work for. They sell financial products and those types of things, right? And so I would love, and a lot of us would love for there to be a greater distinction where if you call yourself a financial advisor, you can only do that if you're a fiduciary. Otherwise, you have to call yourself a financial representative. Unfortunately, the insurance companies and broker-dealers and banks and all these other non-fiduciaries really enjoy the confusion around that. Because a lot of people, they have a financial advisor. They just assume that the advice they're getting is in their best interest because why would it be otherwise? But it's not. And these companies have successfully lobbied so far to negate or downplay any ruling that has allowed this to do that. They've tried to do that. They've tried to introduce legislation that would do this, and it's kind of been corrupted and downplayed and all of this. So when I do it, I always try to not call everyone a financial advisor. There's a lot of people that will identify that, but I want to differentiate between the two. And so we'll try to call people who are acting as fiduciaries, we'll try to call them fiduciary advisors. And those who are just under the suitability model who can sell products, we'll call them financial representatives or financial reps from now on. So why would anyone, right? If fiduciaries have to act in your best interests and representatives can act in their own best interests instead of yours, why would anyone work with a representative and not a fiduciary? And the main reason is that the suitability model pays better than the fiduciary model, right? There are many, many more representatives in the suitability column of the balance sheet than there are in the fiduciary column. Like, I don't know what the exact ratio is, but it's a massive amount over here and a very small comparative amount in the fiduciary column. And true fiduciaries, they're just harder to find. And if you don't know the difference, right? If you don't know what to look for and how to find a true fiduciary, you will then just kind of by default end up working with someone who's not a fiduciary, probably without even knowing it, right? Again, most people think they are working with a fiduciary, but they're not. And why are there so many more financial reps than fiduciary advisors? And again, the answer is because the suitable financial products pay professionals more than fiduciary financial strategies, right? Suitable financial products pay professionals more than fiduciary financial strategies, right? So we have this kind of like the strategy versus product dichotomy here. And so let's go back to our options, that we said before, the option A and B, one which is better for the client and one which is better for the advisor, right? And so let's say that you're a client that has $300,000 to put into one strategy or the other. Maybe you have more than that, but maybe you're just contemplating $300,000. And so let's say that option A then is a well-diversified portfolio that's going to give you the best chance of your money outpacing inflation, outliving you, and outperforming any of the other strategies that are out there, right? It's going to give you the best chance. Nobody knows the future, but it's the best chance of doing all those things. So this is going to be an advisory model, right? And it's going to pay the professional 1/4 of 1%, right? 0.25% each quarter. And the client can pull their money out anytime. They can leave anytime without any penalties. And so the advisor has to continually work to serve that client and to give the best advice and the best service going forward. Okay, so that's option A, a well-diversified investment portfolio. And option B is a variable annuity. And it's got lots of bells and whistles, and it's going to guarantee a an income that the client can't outlive. It's going to pay them out a certain income for the rest of their life. Now, granted, that's a flat income. It's going to be guaranteed forever, even while everything else that they need and want to buy is going to be increasing, but they'll just gloss over that part. And this annuity will also pay the professional 7% upfront. Right? So 0.25% on the other one, and this one's 7% of an upfront payment. The client's also going to suffer a 7% penalty if they try to take any of their money out in the first 7 years. And so one is a relatively low fee advisory portfolio, and the other one is a high fee upfront commission product, right? And so when looking at these, the fees and penalties on the annuity are going to make this the worst option, especially when considering everything else that the client has going on. But it's going to pay the professional much more. So what we end up having, right, is like an ongoing service versus like a one-time payday distinction, right? So we're option A, right, if it pays 0.25% of the $300,000 that you put in there, that's going to pay the professional $750 per quarter, right? And if the account goes down, then it's going to be adjusted and their pay is also going to go down the next quarter. And if the client makes money, the advisor will get paid more. And if the professional again is going to need to provide that ongoing service, that ongoing good advice, because the client can leave whenever they want and take all their money out and go whenever they want without penalty. And so there's this ongoing service aspect of this. The other one, an option B, pays 7% of $300,000 all up front, or $21,000. That's the commission that the professional would get from this, right? And the professional is unaffected by the future performance of the annuity because they get all of their money up front. It's just one big payday. They've already cashed their check. And the insurance company knows the client won't leave because, the insurance company that issues the annuity, because the client's going to have a 7% penalty if they try to leave. And so one more time, right, just for clarity, right, you have, again, fiduciary advice versus a suitable sale. The fiduciary advice will pay the representative or the professional $750, and the suitable sale will pay them $21,000. $750, $21,000. Okay, can you see why there are more representatives in this column than fiduciaries over here? Can you see why more people would be more likely to recommend suitable products instead of best interest products? The payday is massively compelling between these things. And so this matters, right? Because if you're going to someone and they are massively incentivized to recommend products to you that are worse for you versus the ones that are best for you because they don't pay them as much, that matters. Right? So the bottom line is working with a fiduciary really, really matters. Because if you're not, then you might miss out on the best strategies. Because the best strategies rarely pay more. There's thousands, tens of thousands of financial products out there, all of which are designed to pay representatives really well to entice them to go out and sell them, right? You've got companies that they employ their representatives, and so they have to, right? They've got quotas of their own products, their own company's products that they must sell, which again, if you have to sell me a product as a client, how do I know it's really good for me, or are you just doing it because you have to meet your quota, right? And they've also got these more independent advisors, but they still have all these different companies to choose from, and all of them are trying to make products with the biggest payouts possible to representatives so that the representatives have a reason to sell their products over another company's products, right? So, but most of your success will come from good strategies, not good financial products. And there are no companies paying for good strategies. Only you as a client can pay for good strategies. And so if you're not working with a fiduciary, you may just be sold products and you might miss out on the best possible strategies. And of course, with that, right, you might be sold very expensive products. Almost all financial products are massively expensive. There's layers and layers of fees, or they pretend to be free, but then there's caps and other things baked in there that are essentially the fee that you pay. And they're almost always far more expensive than some of the strategy alternatives that are out there. You might be locked into some of these bad accounts, right? So many of them, because they're paying out these massive commissions to the representatives. If you try to leave, if you try to take your money out, if you try to do a different strategy, they're going to penalize you so they can recoup some of that commission that they've already paid out. And through all that, right, you might end up lining the pockets of these professionals all at the expense of your own, right? All financial advice True financial advice is supposed to be there to help you retire successfully and stay successfully retired. But if you keep getting locked into all these big, expensive products that are hampering your success, you will be lining their pockets with these huge commissions at the expense of your own. And that's just not the way that it's supposed to be. And so I contend that no one in their right mind would work with a financial representative instead of a fiduciary advisor. Right? No one in their right mind would work with a financial representative over a fiduciary advisor. It just doesn't happen. The only reason that happens is because people don't know the difference. And so if this resonates with you and you're like, man, yeah, what the heck? Why would anyone work with a financial representative? Shouldn't everything be in the client's best advice? What about consumer protections and all these other things? The government's not going to fix this. It's not going to mandate they try to mandate all these different things, and all that ends up being is more and more disclosures and longer contracts. And yes, all the conflicts are disclosed in there, but you're not going to read a 70-page contract before working with an advisor. It just doesn't happen. And so we, as households, as individuals, we need to be educated and educate ourselves so that we can make good decisions. And so if you're like, yes, I want to work with a fiduciary, I think everyone I know should be working with fiduciary, then let's spread this message around, right? Spread this one so that this week we're wrapping up here. This is just, what is it, right? What is the difference between, why does it matter so much? And then next week we're going to talk about, how do I know if I am working with a true fiduciary? If you're already working with an advisor, how do I know whether they are a fiduciary or not? And again, there's a lot of people that claim to be, but they're using loopholes to claim to be fiduciaries, and they're still not true fiduciaries. So we're going to teach you how to identify a true fiduciary, and then if you're not already working with one, how to find one. So that's coming up next week. And so share this with people if you find it helpful. We're on podcasts, we're on YouTube, we're all over the place. And so we're excited to see you next week as we dig further into how do I know if I'm working with fiduciary, and how do I go about finding one if I'm not. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did enjoy that, you would love being a part of our free membership community. It's called Retire Membership, and you can sign up today completely for free. When you do that, you get a host of bonus and exclusive content that we don't give out anywhere else. For example, you can buy my book, 3D Retirement Income, on Amazon, but if you become a Retire member, we will send you one for free or give you the audiobook and ebook just for signing up. You also get additional bonus content, exclusive content, including Client Corner insights from some of the best minds in behavioral investing, workbooks to go along with our workshops to help you get the most out of it, and more ongoing bonus and exclusive content. Some of this you can't get anywhere else, and so we would love for you to join our community. You can join now at retiremembership.com. Otherwise, there's a link in the description of this video where you can sign up. All we want to do is continue to give you the best information out there so that you can retire successfully and stay successfully retired. So you can go in there, do that on our website. There's also a longer form podcast. I think it's episode 80 that will help explain what it is and what we're trying to do with Retire Membership. But join now for free. Get this and much more exclusive content by joining us today. We look forward to seeing you there, and thanks for watching. Cheers.